Welcome to another episode of Ruby from Scratch. Now, why are we looking at this chart? Why are we looking at this Game of Thrones name, right? So basically, I've decided that for me to go through the Ruby tutorial and teach you each and every part of Ruby on its own would be extremely boring for you guys. It's just going to be me saying, oh, here's an array, here's what you can do with an array, here's what you can do with a hash, here's what you can do with strings and numbers. And it's just, basically I thought back to when I was learning programming, when I was learning Ruby. And, most of the tutorials were just like, okay, here's what you can do with an array. But they never introduced me to the concept of why I want to use an array in the first place. Basically, there was no context around what I was learning. There was no... okay, you can use an array to solve this sort of problem. You can use a hash to solve this kind of problem. When you're faced with this problem, you should use this. There was no context. And that's why I thought that, for me, it took me longer to understand the whole picture because I wasn't taught the big picture. So here it is, the big picture for you guys. Here's how I'm going to do my Ruby from scratch, right? We're going to try and build this very simple game. Right now, this game, you're probably familiar with it. It's always on Facebook and Twitter and all these places. Figure out your Game of Thrones name based on the name that you have, based on your birth date, based on your last name and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you've all done it before. If you've been living under a rock, I'm going to go through how it works in just a sec. But essentially, it's just something simple with some very simple mechanics. And I'll show you how you can take the data input and translate it into a game, like a quick little game that will translate, your name with your first name and last name, and your sex, and then your date of birth, well, your month of birth in this case, and turn it into like, you have a title in the Game of Thrones universe, right? You have a name and a job, and you belong to a house. So that's a quick little thing that I think it's not too simple. And this being Game of Thrones, definitely it's gonna have it's gonna be explicit content. I'm just kidding. I mean, there's just one word in here which is very obscene, but anyway, I hope you guys are all over 18. Yeah, and actually it's 2 words. I just saw one more. Anyway, it doesn't matter. All right, let's get started. And so in case you've been living under a rock and you don't know how these things work, it's very simple. So let's say, for example, my name is Zaxiri. So the first letter of my first name is Z, and the first letter of the last name is S, right? So what does that mean? So based on this chart, I can map my name, my first name, onto the men's first name section. And basically my name in Game of Thrones is going to be Jojen, right? Because it's Z equals Jojen in the top chart right there. My house name is apparently Tully, right? So I was born in November, so I'm going to be a sellsword, right? So basically, I'm going to be a sellsword in House Tully, and my name is Jojen. That's, essentially it, right? So I'm Zaxary, male, November, and yeah, so that's the answer that I would get. Now, that would be the data input, right? This is the data that I would input into the system, and the system has to use this information somehow and figure out what I am on the Game of Thrones based on the rules set by this chart here. What we're going to do as a project is we're going to program this chart so that when we just put in the input, these 3 inputs, we can put in Zaxary, male, November, we get our ranking in the Game of Thrones universe. So it's not like a game that's gonna, it's not a breakthrough game. It's just something which is simple enough that I can show you guys all the mechanics of Ruby and all the cool stuff within Ruby. We can use Ruby to create this little thing. And I hope the project is not too simple and it's not too, the goal of this video is for beginners. So, someone who has no experience in programming. So I think starting with something like this, which is simple, is the best way forward. Alright guys, so that'll wrap it up for this video. This is just to help you explain the mechanics of a project that we're going to build using Ruby. And in the next episode, I'm going to be showing you guys how to break down each of the problem, right? So once we get the input, what do we do with it? How do we make Ruby understand that this is the first name, this is the last name, this represents a sex. So over here, if you see, women have their name, and then the men have their name. So if you're a woman, you're gonna use a different set of names, right? So if you're a man, you're gonna use a different set of names. So we're gonna write all that logic and all that stuff in Ruby, basically to replicate this chart. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's gonna be our project. So all right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know there wasn't any programming in here, but definitely, in the next episode, we're gonna show you how to break down each of the parts in the set of data that we received, and how we translate it into something like this, right? So if you like this episode, like this episode. If you don't like it, let me know why you don't like it. And share this episode with your friends and family. I know it's Game of Thrones is totally not related to Ruby, but it is. It's going to be the project that we're going to be building. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you guys in the next episode.